Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Week 3 lecture on Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. Today, we're going to go over the mechanisms of evolution, or what are the forces within nature that cause species to change over time? Or more specifically, what causes the frequency or the percentage of alleles to change in a population over time? Because that's what evolution is. It's just the change in the frequency of the alleles in a population. Now, our lesson objective for today is to identify and describe the various mechanisms that cause species of organisms to change over time. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, before we look at things that cause allele frequencies in a population to change, we should first look at what's called the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium or the Hardy-Weinberg principle. This was developed by G.H. Hardy and Wilhelm Weinberg, and they stated that allele frequencies in a population of organisms will not change. They will remain stable unless an outside force causes them to change. For example, the United States population had about 35% of people with blue eyes during World War II. Currently, in 2019, that percentage is down to about 17%. Obviously, the frequency of the blue-eyed allele has changed dramatically in the United States since World War II. Something caused that frequency of alleles to change. Now, these are the things that would keep allele frequencies at a constant rate. So this is what would make Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium a reality. Number one, no selection, no natural selection. So there's no organisms that are more favorable in the ecosystem, so they don't have a better chance to survive or reproduce. Two, no mutations. So there's no changes in the genetic code or DNA. So there's no new alleles or genes incorporated into the population. Number three, no migration. That means no immigration or no emigration. So no new members are moving into the population and no members are moving out of the population. Number four, large population. If it is a small population, the frequency of alleles will have a more tendency to fluctuate. And number five, random mating. Because if there is random mating, the frequency of alleles should remain constant. Now we will look at some things that do cause allele frequencies in a population to change over time. First, and most importantly, is called natural selection. Now, Charles Darwin also called this survival of the fittest. Natural selection is a process by which organisms with traits better suited to an environment tend to survive and reproduce. Now, since they reproduce offspring, this should increase the frequency of their alleles in the next generation's gene pool. For example, you can see at the bottom, there's a little population of giraffes there. Some of those giraffes, they have longer necks than the other giraffes. There is variation of traits amongst the giraffe population. Well, giraffes with a slightly longer neck have a better chance to reach leaves higher up in the trees. Therefore, they have a better chance to get enough food in order to survive. And if you survive, you have a better chance to reproduce and pass on that trait of having a longer neck to the next generation of giraffes. Number two is immigration, emigration. And this is simply when organisms move in or out of a population that can cause changes in the gene pool or the frequency of alleles in the gene pool. For example, previously stated, in World War II, the United States had roughly 35% of people with blue eyes. Today, that number is closer to 17%. Now, having blue eyes does not give you a worse or better chance to survive and reproduce. However, immigration and emigration has caused that frequency of the blue-eyed allele to go down over time. Now, the next item that causes allele frequencies in a population to change over time is called genetic drift. Now, unlike natural selection, this is changes in the gene frequency due to chance events. These are random. Natural selection is not random. Giraffes with a longer neck have a better chance to survive and reproduce. They are not lucky. Same thing with cheetahs. The faster cheetah has a better chance to get food, therefore it has a better chance to survive and reproduce. Genetic drift has more to do with luck. So these are things where something occurs that wipes out a portion of the population, and the portion of the population that got wiped out has nothing to do with their fitness. They were just unlucky. So these are things like natural disasters, like a flood, a fire, volcanic eruption, maybe a asteroid impact, things like that. So it has nothing to do with fitness. It just has to do with being lucky or unlucky. Now, how does genetic drift affect small versus large populations? Well, genetic drift tends to have its influence more strongly impacted on small populations. For example, if you look at the population of beetles down there, you start with 3 green beetles and 6 tan beetles. Now, this guy happens to accidentally step on 2 of the green beetles. Now, this had nothing to do with fitness. He wasn't trying to step on the green ones. He just accidentally happened to step on 2 of the green ones. And you can see what resulted. Now you got down to just 1 green beetle and 6 tan beetles. So the green beetles, they weren't less fit, they were just less lucky. So that's changes in the frequency of alleles in a population just to random chance events. Now we're going to go over a couple different types of genetic drift. Now, don't worry because these are basically the same thing, just a little bit different on how they occur. The first one is called a population bottleneck. This is a chance event where a majority of a population is wiped out and the new population's allele frequency is different from the original population. Now, the second type is called the founder effect. It's basically the same thing, except this time a large part of the population is not going to be wiped out by some sort of disaster, but a small part of the population is going to move. So, this is a random event where a portion of a larger population migrates away. The migrants do not have the same frequency of alleles as the original population. So, let's look at that image up above. You can see on the island on the left, there are 23 individuals. Now, the individual in the very center that has the red dot on his chest, that person has some sort of trait. Now, you can see in that original population of 23 individuals, that trait is very rare. Only 1 out of 23 individuals have that trait. Now, only 5 individuals move to their new island. And you can see it just happened where one of the 5 had that trait signified by the red dot on his chest. Therefore, when that population repopulates, as you can see on the far right, a far greater percentage of the population contains that trait signified by the red dot. Now, that would be called the founder effect just because the population, a small part of it, moved to a new area, and a larger part of the population has the new trait. If it was the bottleneck effect, it would be the exact same thing, except a large part of that original population on the left would be wiped out, and that one person with the red dot trait would be left behind, causing a higher frequency of that trait in the population. And now, 2 more mechanisms of evolution. 2 things that change the frequency of alleles in a population over time. Number 4 is mutations. That's changes in the DNA of organisms, which occurs during DNA replication or during cell reproduction. Now, if you remember from nucleic acids, DNA transmits their code via 4 different nitrogen bases. And those are adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, or A, T, C, and G. And it is the order of those nitrogen bases, or those order of the letters, which determines all of our traits. Now, those order of the letters, or the order of the nitrogen bases, determine the order or the sequence of amino acids in the protein. Now, you can see in the image above, the DNA was supposed to put an adenine, but it replaced it with a cytosine. It made a mistake. Therefore, the order of the amino acids in the protein was disrupted. That could cause the traits in that organism to change. Now, the new trait may give the organism a better chance to survive, which would increase its fitness, or it could give it a worse chance to survive, which would lessen its fitness. Now, Another mechanism of evolution is number 5, isolation. When one species of organism or a population of organisms gets separated from each other, they no longer share the same gene pool. In the image to the left, you can see a population of beetles. They've been separated from each other by a river. Now they no longer share the same gene pool because they can no longer interbreed with one another. They no longer can have offspring with one another. Over time, those two populations of beetles can actually evolve to form two different species of beetles that can no longer have healthy, fertile offspring with each other. Okay, that is all for today. I will see you next week. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.